Yeah.
Yeah.
I know, I at least if memory serves correctly, a big part of this program was kind of you facilitating your own healing through a lot of these different issues. And so I imagine that because there's also a very large focus on the community aspect of this journaling, of, it's not something that you are doing alone. Can you explain a little bit about um, how the community-driven aspect came to be, and as a result, what the role is, especially involving pen pals? Is that something that gets touched on in a couple of different points? Um, yeah.
Yeah. No, that's a great question. This was inspired by my own healing recovery journey. I was on a path to self-destruction. It was 2013, and I was at the progressive stage of my alcoholism. And I was losing my mind. I had several two psychoses, but several manic um, mania episodes and depressions. Um, I've tried prescription medication. I've tried going to the psychiatrist, psychologist. Um, and I even tried the suicide hotline back when. Um, but I think it was honestly this God shot moment where I remember I was like really on the like this point of like this jumping off point. Like I was already ideating, but I was pretty serious about it. And I was gonna go on this road trip to basically end my life. And then like instead of turning a left on the freeway, I made a right. And I had this voice like kind of direct me to like just keep driving. And I was driving and wandering and driving and wandering. And like within 15 minutes, I wandered upon this sign that I recognized from a guy I was dating when he was in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. And that's how I recognized that sign. And I was like, wait a minute, I recognize that sign. So I pulled over. And when I opened the door to it, my first A meeting, it was right in the middle of the meeting. I don't know when, what time, but I was like right in the middle of the meeting. Someone was sharing, and I just started crying. This lady gave me a box of tissues, and I was just crying right next to her. She was very gentle about it. And for like a good while, I was just crying. But I started hearing stories of people in the room sharing about their addictive experiences. But it wasn't just the addiction, it was like the psychology behind it, the mindset behind it, the voices in their head. That was what kind of language it was it was saying to them. Those things I started identifying with a lot. And I was like, wow, this is amazing. For like that hour, I got out of my own head, and I felt heard and validated, even though I didn't speak a single word. And I remember going to these meetings like 3, 4 times a day, because back then I was like in this hopeless state, and I didn't have a job. And I was just kind of like, I just felt like my life is just like on pause. So I just kept going these meetings. And over time, like within 90 days, my mind was like renewed. And I didn't take a single drop of I didn't drink. I didn't drink. That was a miracle in and of itself. And so I recognize the power of Mirror Darkly sharing. I recognize the healing benefits um, of just being in the rooms with kindred strangers sharing authentically and truthfully their stories, their experiences. And so I made a promise to higher power that I would facilitate something like this for future generations that may not identify with alcohol or alcoholism, because it was still very good for my mental health and it was still very therapeutic. Um, and so I made that promise a while back. I think it's been 10 years now since I first made that promise. And yeah, I found it to be the single most effective recovery tool that I experienced of all the things that I did already experience, whether it's hospitalization, mental institutionalization, prescription medication, therapy. I feel like just being in the rooms of 12-step groups where people get to share has been one of the single most effective methods of my own recovery. So I wanted to create that space in a more creative writing focused modality for people. And that way it could reach students, high school, middle school, down the line. And I know what inspired me initially to leave education was this girl who took her life, 12 years old, because of her first heartbreak. Home was not like conducive. And, the pain was too unbearable. And I totally got it. It wasn't even like, oh, why would she do that? It was like, oh, I totally get why she would do that. Like, because I've been there in that very, very isolated and terrifying place and painful place. So it's like, how do I get back to her? How do I get back to people like her? And that's kind of been my journey, actually. So recently, the board decided we're going to lower the barrier to entry. We're going to make everything free. And, we're going to figure out some kind of campaign to get it into the schools. Somehow, some way. It might not be through the schools, but it might just be just like this, through media, social media. Like, just let them know, hey, there's a resource here. You can create your own love story chapter. You could facilitate your own Mirror Darkly groups, just like 12-step programs for adults. And you can find your own pen pal. Oh yeah, speaking of pen pal, so a pen pal is more intimate. Hopefully, just like in 12-step groups, we have sponsorships in 12-step groups. A sponsor is someone, not a non-professional, somebody who has gone through the steps, who could take you through the steps. And so we would want pen pals to be kind of like that, but not like experienced, less experienced hierarchy, but more of like fellow travelers where they're like on the same level and they're working through those acts. We call them acts. They're working through those acts in similar time space, right? So when they're working through their shadows and the workshops that help them discern what kind of shadow they're experiencing, alchemize or noble, when they're helping each other formulate anti-curses to their curses. I feel like these fellow travelers or pen pals could be more effective. Just like everyone's gonna eventually figure out how to play Monopoly. You just buy the board game and then you sit around with your friends and read instructions, and eventually y'all figure out where the pieces are and how to play it. So it's gonna be designed the same way. It's anybody could play it as long as you have enough players, which is like you just need two, like one you and a pen pal, and then the two of you could work through, you know, your narratives. And it is completely like, I think the miracle of 12-step groups is like the co-founders who started it. First off, they didn't even like invent it. Okay. People like think they're the ones that like, I mean, they're the ones that branded and popularized it, but there were many other groups before them that have figured this out. The Mirror Darkly phenomenon. 1 Corinthians 13:12, for now we see a reflection as in a mirror, and then we shall see face to face. For now I know in part, then I shall know fully, even as I'm fully known. I was reading Malcolm X's autobiography, and under his Islam Brotherhood, they had a drug addiction recovery program that was effective and worked along very similar lines, where it's like recovering drug addict, helping newly drug addict that needs like the early stages of, you know, and then they help each other out. Like that's how it works. And that's what compassion is. Compassion means to suffer with, and it's not something that can be manufactured. It has to be authentic and in that moment, like, wow, this is where I'm at. This is where you are. Boom. Like somehow it aligns, the star aligns, and here we are helping each other out. And that's compassion, right? That's why I believe like veterans should help veterans, and alcoholics should help alcoholics. And when we scale this program to middle school students, it really should be people within their own age groups, no outside adults, no supervision, none of that stuff. Like, and this is speaking from an educator, okay? So it's like, we teachers love to micromanage everything, and it's just like, nope, sorry. You know, privacy is very important. Anonymity is very important. So, yeah, that's what matters. It's like just the recovery of the person that needs it. So going back to pen pals, a pen pal is just a kindred fellow, someone that somehow has experienced similar things in your life, in their life. I usually pick sponsors in the fellowship that has gone through similar experiences that I have. My first sponsor, we both had gone through major breakups that were devastating. And so I picked her because she had the serenity about her that I didn't have at the time. She was already in the like later stages of forgiving her ex-partner, and I still couldn't figure that out. So I needed her. But again, in 12-step, it was more of like more experience, less experience, whereas like the Love Stories program is more like we're on this level here, like equal. And I attracted an equal fellow traveler when I was traveling in Poland, and she and I had very similar issues when it comes to trauma and relationships. And I actually found that to be quite more effective in a way, because then I didn't feel pressure to like follow directions or like follow the advice of someone that felt like they had more authority to give advice. I think a fellow traveler is simply someone that could be a sounding board so you could figure it out yourself. Very similar to what's happening right now, where you're asking me a question and I'm just rambling on. And as I'm talking, I'm actually figuring out the process as I am speaking about it, right? And that's what learning is all about. It's about and brainstorming. It's like the more we talk and discuss, the closer we are to a breakthrough. But that process needs to happen. That interaction, that engagement, that talking out loud needs to happen. And to be quite frank, even this depth of, me discussing what pen pals are for and the design of Mirror Darkly's, where that was inspired from, it wouldn't be as detailed and thorough if I was talking to myself. Like if I just recorded myself and there was nobody on the other end listening, it wouldn't be this thorough and detailed. There's something very miraculous and spirit filled when you have another human being on the other line listening, whether that's over Zoom or face to face. It's just something very mystical about it. Yeah, and that's why Mirror Darkly's journaling together and having, even though you're like, even though you're not talking to them the whole time, you're literally just like, okay, I'm doing my own thing. You're doing your own thing for 20 minutes. For some reason, this moment, this sacred space that is given to two different people at the same time doing very similar but different activities, and then being able to share about it right away, for some reason, it just gets my writing to another level. I don't know how to explain it. It's like when I try doing it on my own, I sometimes get writer's block, and like I start questioning, second guessing my own writing. But in a Mirror Darkly session, it's like it's timed, there's people around, you feel accountable, you feel part of. There's just like this moment where you're just like infilled by some kind of Holy Spirit, and you're just like, it's called inspiration or flow. Like it just, you tap in and it's just different. And of course, that's not to say, you know, you can't do it alone. Everyone's been a writer. Every author has done it alone at some point in time, most of the time. So this Mirror Darkly is relatively a new concept, but it works for me. And it's been working for several other journal artists in this space where they could write more deeply and authentically and vulnerably. For some weird paradoxical reason, they could write deeper through people in a Mirror Darkly space. And yeah, I hope that answered your question.